Hey everyone, thanks for tuning into my channel, Scott's Copters. This video is on tips for long distance flight. Before I begin, I need to make a disclaimer. This video is for informational purposes only. I'm not going to tell you that you should perform a long distance flight. There are several reasons for this. One, you may lose your quadcopter in the process. You may get into some trouble. You need to check your local regulations, the law, etc. if this is something you can even do. All the information I've gained, experience I may have, was all done before these new regulations with having to register your drone and all that. So with that being said, a long distance flight is something you don't want to go ahead and try the first time. You need to work your way up to it. So for instance, take your quadcopter out 1,000 feet and back, see how that works, and then bump it up to 1,500 feet and back, and so on. You need to gain some trust in your quadcopter and your flying abilities. You may realize something like you might have a broken antenna and not know it, so you don't want to just go ahead and try a long distance flight right away. There may be some issues you need to iron out first. So antenna orientation is very important. This is something very basic, but I'm just going to go ahead and cover this real quick. You need to have your antennas up like this when you're flying because the signal actually comes out the sides. It doesn't come out the end here. So if you're trying to do a long distance flight or even a close one, and you have your antennas pointed like this at the copter, it's just not going to work. So they need to be up like this. The day that you go to perform your long distance flight, you should check the weather before you go. Obviously wind's important, but that's not the only thing. There's something else called KP, which is magnetic interference. And if you go on this website called UAV Forecast, you can check the KP on there. Just for me, if the KP say like 4 or 5, 6 or higher, I wouldn't fly under those conditions. I would wait for a day where the KP is 3 or less. The lower the better. Wind is a huge factor. You always have to account for wind. You can't just fly out until your battery's 50% remaining and then expect to make it back if there's any wind. It's just not going to happen. So that kind of goes back to when I was saying you have to work your way up. You need to try some flights. You need to see how your quadcopter does, taking the wind into account, and then the day that you go to try your big long distance flight, you need to see how the wind is that day and how far you can go out, etc. And you just have to work the numbers and to make sure you have enough battery to make it back. You don't have to do this, but I recommend bringing 2 batteries with you if you can. And the reason for that is I would go ahead and put one in, warm up the craft, and then do your compass calibration on that battery, and then shut down and put in the other battery. You don't have to do it. This is just a tip for if you want to get the absolute most battery life. Go ahead and do the compass calibration on one and then put in your other battery so you get the most flight time. You should turn off Wi-Fi on your iPad, or cell phone, whatever you put on here. And then if you got another cell phone in your pocket, turn off Wi-Fi on that. If you have some friends with you, ask them if they can turn off Wi-Fi on whatever devices they may have. If Wi-Fi is on, it's just going to eat up bandwidth on that frequency that you may end up needing for your flights. So it's a good idea to have it off. When you go and you take off, you should go ahead and go up to 400 feet. And the reason for that is, especially the further out you get, you need to make sure that you're up high enough that you're still getting good line of sight back to the radio, back to the controller. If you're out, say, a couple miles and you're only 200 feet up, you may not be getting good line of sight. So it's just a good idea to go ahead and go up to 400 feet. Now, I know what some of you may have been thinking this whole video. You're like, he's showing a stock controller, a stock radio with stock antennas. What's he talking about long distance flight anyway? Where's the booster? Blah, blah, blah. So I'm going to tell you guys I don't have a booster. What I have is just simply called a directional reflector. What this does is it just sends the signal straight out and off to the sides a little bit. So this is really a great mod you can do for the controller. You see it just goes right on. There's no wires. You don't have to do anything special. It just plops right in. Another thing this does, I'm not sure a lot of people realize, or maybe they just don't think about it, is when you have this on, the antenna doesn't listen for anything behind it. If there's any interference or anything going on back here, the antenna doesn't care just because it's not listening for anything back here. So it's just sending the signal straight out, which is great, especially for a long distance flight. You don't, who cares about all this stuff back here? You're just going out. So I'd recommend getting one of these. It's a good bang for the buck. I got this for like $18 shipped, and it's worth every penny. I've seen Phantom 3, with this light bridge system, go 3 miles with one of these on. So I'm honestly not sure if it was even required, because I've seen them go 2 miles before with this just bone stock, no reflector or anything. It was just put on for good measure. So I can tell you, if anything, it definitely didn't hurt. Now, if you guys want to go and get an actual power booster, that's fine, but you may not even need it unless if you're in a really congested area where there's a lot of Wi-Fi and you really need to have your signal up on top. Then that would be a good idea. Otherwise, this is a great bang for the buck, like I said, and it's probably all you're going to need. It'll satisfy the needs for most people. So I think that about wraps it up for the video. There's a lot of things that you need to keep in mind when you're trying a long distance flight. I'm not going to say it's easy. Like I said, I'm not going to say you should even do it. These are just tips for if you were to do such a thing. It should help you out. So if you guys do have a successful long distance flight, I think that's great, and I'd like to hear about it. So I think that about wraps it up for the video, and thanks for watching.